wizard, Harry.
Hey, what's up guys? Editing Spencer here, and I just wanted to make a quick note at the beginning of this episode. For our Potter Watch episodes, we try to keep these as PG-13 as possible, just because it is a kids book to a large extent, and so for most of our episodes we will swear and talk about whatever, but we try to keep that down to a minimal level for these episodes. However, when we started this episode, we were in a very big rush. We had to go very quickly, and it honestly just kind of slipped my mind. And so there is some swearing in this episode, and I'm just letting you guys know in case you're watching with kids or whatever. But I'm going to do my best. I haven't even edited the episode yet, but I'm going to do my best to mute out the swearing throughout this, and then going forward for future Potter Watch episodes, I will make sure that I tell everybody that at the beginning or like before we start recording. So I just want to make you guys aware, and let you guys know that in the future we're gonna do our best to avoid that. All right, enjoy. What's up, wizards, witches, and muggles? It is time to hop on the Hogwarts Express and go back to school. Welcome back to Potter Watch, a podcast within a podcast where the Fantasy Files and friends go through the entire Harry Potter series, book by book and movie by movie. So Gabe was supposed to be here today, but he's had an emergency come up. We've had a couple of them today. So Gabe is usually here, but for today I am your magical host, Spencer, joined by Bryce from Shelf Centered and our friend Sam, who might as well be a co-host at this point with how many episodes she's been on lately. Seriously, I think we had you on for Will of the Many. That was the first one this year. And then Empire of the Damned. And then
Laura.
Yeah, Loch Lamora and Fourth Wing. Yes. And now Harry Potter, and you're scheduled for another like 2 Gentleman Bastards books. Honorary co-host. But today we will be pretty obviously going through Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, both the book and the movie. We will also be letting spoilers fly from all across the series, so just be prepared for that. This is not a podcast for anyone who has not read the entire series already, or at least like seen all the movies or whatever. As always, our links are in the description, like Twitter, Discord, and Patreon, where you can get exclusive content and see these episodes early before anyone else on YouTube, sometimes weeks before anybody else gets to see them. So Patreon is a great place to support us for sure. And then also down in the description, that's such a hard sentence to say. Also down in the description.
I struggle every time.
Is our bingo card, and if you fill it out using the instructions that are also linked below, then we will straight up buy you a hardcover trilogy of your choosing. But enough about that. Let's talk about Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and introduce our guests. Bryce, welcome back. You were on for we talked about what was the horror book that we talked about?
Robert Jackson Bennett, American Elsewhere.
That's right. Yes, that was fantastic.
So great.
And then I think you came by for our big live stream, right?
Yeah, I jumped in a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was super fun. So yeah, I've been eager to get you back on the channel. I know you don't have a lot of time today. You might have to bounce out in a little bit here, but I'm glad that you're able to. It's all right, man. I totally get it. But yeah, glad you're able to stop by and talk about some Harry Potter for a little bit.
all about the Harry Potter, man. I love it. My kids love it. It's a fun thing for the family, and I think we're going to get to this, or you may without me, but just I love like the lessons that you learn through these, like you really,
Yes.
like, it's stuff that I want my kids to like know about, like sometimes you
Yeah.
got to stand up to even the adults, like
Yeah.
and
For,
do what's right. Sometimes doing what's right and
Isn't
means
easy.
like yeah, it's not easy, first of all, but like
yeah.
it's also doing stuff maybe against the rules sometimes, sometimes I don't know. So
Yeah, I mean, Dumbledore even tells him in this book, he's like, he's basically says, I noticed that you've been breaking a lot of rules lately, with kind of like a wink, because he knows that he's doing it for like the right reason. He's not just being like a dumb kid. I mean, he
Yeah.
is, but he's not just like trying to get into trouble. He's actually like, trying to save the school.
well, I loved one
And
of his lines was literally like, he's like, I told you you'd be expelled if you broke any more school
yes,
rules. And Harry's like, ugh. And then he goes, and I guess that just tells you that sometimes even people like me should, eat their words, like, I'm like, oh, that's
right.
such a good lesson. Like, you can admit,
Yes.
even though you're the top of the line, you're the best ever, you can still admit when you're wrong.
Yes, that's so true. And like in the movie, there was that line in the book, and then in the movie, he says he in that scene is instead with Dumbledore, Harry, and Ron. And he looks at them and he says, "You do realize that in the past few hours you have broken perhaps a dozen school rules, and there is sufficient evidence to have you both expelled. Therefore, it is only fitting that you both receive special awards for
Yeah.
services to the school." I laughed so hard at that, because like I did not remember him saying that at all, and it was great. But going back to kind of the life lesson thing, there's a quote later on. I think it's right before that scene, or maybe it's in the same scene. And I noted it as the most important quote in the book, because I think that this is a lesson that Harry needs to learn. And when we get into talking about like Dumbledore's big plan, because Dumbledore has like this big plan going throughout all the series that we find out about in book 7. He's kind of been working things to not necessarily his own end, but he's been trying to help Harry learn certain lessons that he needs to learn to become the boy who would die later on. And so I love this quote where it's just kind of Dumbledore imparting some of his wisdom. And so Harry's worried about, like, at the very end, he's like talking about like he's been worried about going into Slytherin house, or like not choosing Slytherin house when the hat wanted him to, or if he should have been in there or whatever. And Harry says, "It only put me in Gryffindor because I asked not to go into Slytherin."
Yes.
And Dumbledore says, exactly, which makes you very different from Tom Riddle. It is our choices, Harry, that show who we really are, far more than our abilities. And I'm just like I love it so much. Yeah, I love the just the little life lessons from Dumbledore. And do you read Dresden Files, Bryce?
Yes, I'm all caught up except
Oh,
one
nice.
short story collection I haven't read. I'm
Okay,
saving it for a
cool.
rainy day,
Yeah, for sure. I feel like a lot of those life lesson moments, like those little quotes of wisdom from Dumbledore or something, are also kind of in the Dresden Files. Like, you'll be having like this action-packed Dresden Files book, and then you'll just get like this monologue from Harry that's just like a very like wise life lesson, and I feel like they're really similar in that way.
Oh yeah.
Sam, welcome back. Thank you for popping back in. Did you enjoy reading Harry Potter this week?
I really did, and I had to read book 1 and 2 because I had never read the books. I didn't get into fantasy until I was probably like in my 20s, which is my biggest regret to this day, that I like didn't get into it earlier. And so the older I got, I just kind of had this assumption that it was very young adult and that I wasn't going to get into it. And So I even have like a bag of the whole series over here. My girlfriend let me borrow. She kept trying to push it on me, and I was like, one of these days.
I love that it's a bag of the.
Yeah, it's just a bag of Harry Potter.
I wasn't expecting a bag of the book.
Yes, it was in a Target bag. It's been sitting there next to my bookshelf for months now.
But
that's
so great.
Spencer told me to get the how do you say Mina Lima editions, and they made it so fun that I found myself being like, okay, I can see there's like a pop out coming in 10 pages, you know, I want to keep reading. And
right, you want to get to where
I wanted to get there. I wanted to see it, and I enjoyed the story enough that it wasn't like the only thing keeping me reading, that, you know, it has such cool, it moves the eyes on that one.
Yeah.
That lady, I just really loved it. And I blew through. I was worried because when I agreed, I didn't realize I was agreeing to book 2. Do you know how many times I've done this with Spencer, where he asked me to do
my God.
I don't realize he's asking me for book 2, like Night Angel. Or no, that was book 3, actually, I think.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. I really liked them, and I was watching the movie, and it was actually almost a little confusing for me, because as I was watching the movie, I was like, am I noticing these things now because I read the book? And they completely went over my head before when watching the movie, or am I just confusing it because I'm paying attention to it now? But I loved the book, and it made me enjoy the movie more. It made me like pay attention even more when I was rewatching to see like, oh, they changed this, or oh, I missed that, like this is why they gave you this scene. So I've just really enjoyed it.
And I feel like these 2 first books are like, the movies are very like as close as you can get for a movie and a book, like of all time. Like that's what I feel like.
Yeah.
Like,
and that's
no book and movie get this close together. You can almost interchange them and just jump into book 3.
Like there was one thing I wished that they had shown from book 1 in the movie, where they go to Nearly Headless Nick's like ghost ball Halloween party, and I was like, I would have loved that. And I was like,
I know
it didn't change anything really, you know, just like.
But that's the magic that the book brings, right? Is those little silly elements that I just love. Yeah.
I loved it, and I was almost glad that I had kind of seen the movies first and got to read the books and be like, oh, you know, like see the differences. I liked it.
For sure. Sam, that's so funny, because I have like a very similar story to you, where I saw the movies when I was in like early college, maybe like 19 or 20, but my roommate and I watched them all like back to back to back, but we were also young and like just drinking and not focusing on like the movie and like not paying attention, and so I remember like the gist of the story, but I didn't remember like specifics at all, really. And so last year I finally decided to pick up the books for the first time in my life. I had never read them before, and the first one was free on Audible. And so I was like, why not? I'll try it. If I don't like it, I'll put it down after like a chapter or 2 chapters or whatever. And I got so sucked into them, because I thought the same thing. I'm like, well, they're like kids' books or whatever. No, I mean, like they are, but
like we read such high fantasy that, you know, a lot of fantasy can seem kind of young adult.
Sure.
Not to be snobby. You know what I mean? But like, especially when it is young adult, it's like.
Yeah. Definitely, but like I think I was surprised, like in the first book, when Harry is like in front of the mirror and he's like seeing his parents for the first time ever, and you just have like this super lonely Harry that's just gone through so much and you feel so bad for him. I'm like, man, those like really like deep and sometimes dark themes are there. Like they're really there for adults as well as the kids. And I think that's something that it does so well.
This book too gets into the really big like mud blood versus pure blood debate.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like, those are heavy things that like, I mean, it's, you know, same thing as like mutants and X-Men versus non-mutants and racism, right? And all this, like before. We were just talking about the book 1, Harry Potter, where he's staring into the mirror, right? That gives you deepest desires.
Yeah.
Right? And like, but then you could like waste your life just like
just sitting there.
Like you're not living in life, you're looking at what it coulda, shoulda, woulda been. And but I was saying I cried at the one time I cried was at the end of, I think, book 1, where was it Hagrid who sent out a request for all of Harry's parents' school friends to like send photos and gave to him. I cried.
Oh man, yeah, that
part got me because I was like, yeah, he's lived in this house his whole life where they like wouldn't talk about his parents or history or anything, and now he's like getting all of these like personal photos. I just thought that was like a really beautiful moment.
That was so great. That was so great. I still think, you know, I ask people what their favorite like Harry Potter book is in the series, and I still think that my top 3 are probably Half-Blood Prince as my like all-time favorite, and then I think the first book comes in at a close second. Like I really love the first book. I think it's like dang near perfect.
Yeah. I'm really excited to keep going through the series.
Yeah,
I need to read her book 1, but I kind of was like, you know, the first books are so interchangeable with the movies that like whatever. But I really had a fun time with Chamber of Secrets, just reading, and like it's the meat for me. It's like it's all those details, like Sam, you were mentioning, like the nearly headless Nick, and like just that detail of like because he's like it's just an inch or whatever it is, like a centimeter. Like I can't be in the headless hunt, and like that's just it's so clever, and like you're like think of that. Is this something she thought about, or just that came after? Like I thought nearly headless Nick was just hilarious as a character of the ghost, but then like now that he can't even be part of like his life, his dead life, his death stream. I don't know.
Yeah.
I thought it was great in the book, though, because I feel like they didn't say in the movie. I felt like we got more of an explanation in the book for why he couldn't be a part of the Headless Hunt. And they read the letter and they're like, it would make it really hard for you to participate in like the head juggling act and like this other thing. I was like, okay, now I get why he's being excluded because you can't physically do that.
Right.
I was looking it up because someone had a shower thought because I was like, "This, I love that part." Someone had a shower thought that like nearly headless Nick trying to get into the headless hunt is like a bicyclist trying to get into the club of unicyclists, and you're like, it is kind of along the same line, but it's that much of a difference that it makes all the difference.
I like that. That's great.
That's so true.
That's very good.
That's so great.
And now I wonder if like the reason they left that out in the movie is because they didn't do his Halloween party where Harry has to suck up to the Baron or whoever it was that could get him in.
Yeah.
Well, that kind of makes sense now that I'm like thinking it through.
Right.
Well, I'm sure it was like a pacing thing with the movie. You didn't want to make it too long. And that was one you could technically cut out, but it is like one of my favorite parts of the book. Right?
Yeah.
Like, it is such a magical, just like, and everybody, and it sets it up the rest of it too from there because everyone's like, well, why didn't you guys go to the party? That's pretty suspicious. Must be the heir of Slytherin, I guess. You know,
right, yeah.
You've been setting things up, huh?
Yep. That's true. They did set him up. I feel like the book did a lot better job setting it up to make Harry look like he was doing it than the movies did somewhat.
So from reading the book, who did you guys on your first read? What did you who did you think was the heir of Slytherin? Like, did you guys have any guesses along the way?
I watched the movies first, so unfortunately, like I already knew when reading it. Like, I would have definitely thought Draco. That's like who my mind would have gone to for sure.
Okay.
It kind of all things were kind of pointing there, and that's the same like. Even just rereading and knowing generally like who it was, like, and you could see, I was just trying to go, okay, who else would I honestly think it would be? I was kind of going, oh, well, could it be some random person even? And I don't know. There's just that moment where Crabbe and Goyle like polyjuice potion to become them, and then like run into the girl they're like, what? Where's our house? And she's like, I don't know.
I'm Ravenclaw.
I'm Ravenclaw.
Like maybe her now. So I was all over, but they pointed me at Draco, and I was like, I don't even remember when I first read it. I didn't read it till after I watched the movies. The first 4 movies I watched.
Okay.
So we all watched the movies before we read the books. That's really interesting.
I read 5 on. I read before the movies.
Okay.
5 on before the 5 movies and on came out. Okay.
Yeah.
So like for the books we're doing, we all watched the movies first.
Yeah, and I think for me when I was reading the books, I honestly like did not remember anything about Chamber of Secrets. Like I didn't remember that Ginny was even there that year, like at all.
Really?
And I didn't remember like hardly anything about it. But I'm curious, did anybody, or do you think that you would have suspected Percy at all?
He was a little like he was, you know, and they kind of reveal that at the end. He was being suspicious, but they reveal that at the end of the book.
I thought right away. I go, he's got a girlfriend. Without
really?
I knew he's got a girlfriend. Like, what do you mean? Like with the age, I go. Literally, my mind immediately went, "Oh, he's got a girlfriend." Like, so it just went right over my head to make him suspicious. I had guessed correctly and very confidently had I guessed that.
Well done.
Yeah.
Which is funny. That's another detail of the mandrakes when they kept giving an update on the mandrakes, and it was like, well, once they start trying to move in with each other, then we know they're pretty much ready. Like, it was along the same lines of like what Percy's doing.
They were like, they're getting really moody and distant, so we're getting close.
So it just like describes like teenagers, and then it's like describing like young. It's just, I was like, that's those clever details that like that's what gets me for the series.
Yeah, she puts those things in such really clever ways, and I thought that's funny that you guessed that right away, Sam, because that like went over my head. I was like, what if he's the heir of Slytherin? Like,
I thought that's what we were supposed to like know is what it was. Like, no, he's got a girlfriend.
Okay, yeah, I did not see that
shows
coming.
Where my head is always at.
You guys did just read Fourth Wing. Come on.
Right, yeah. Get it into gear. Okay, so we kind of...
question before I forget about a difference between the book and the movie.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't fully paying attention when I watched the movie earlier.
Okay.
In the books, Hermione accidentally gets Miss Norris's hair when they're doing the transformation. What is it called again?
Polyjuice.
Well, I had understood it was the cat of the person. What's her name? It was the cat. It was just
her
person.
Cat in general.
Her cat. It wasn't necessarily Norris.
But my main question was, I thought in the movies she purposely picked animal hair.
No.
No? Okay, I'm just misremembering it then. Okay. I was just like, am I not remembering this correctly? Or did she mean to try to be an animal?
Yeah, no, she was getting like hairs off of her like robe or something to use for the Polyjuice. And it ended up being a cat. Okay. For some reason for the movies I was like, I remembered it being, you know, her purposely trying to pick the cat, but just to show how, you know, much I was paying attention. Yeah. Nova here says, I love the depiction of her as a cat in the movie. And something I noticed last night and this morning when I was watching it, I'm like, man, the practical effects are so good. Like the way that she, I don't know, just like the makeup and the hair and everything, it looks so cool as a cat. And just like for the rest of the movie too, you know, these movies, at least the first two, were kind of before, you know, like modern Hollywood where everything is like super over the top CGI. Mm-hmm. And everything just looks so good with like the mix of CGI and practical effects. They're so great. I love them.
Yeah. Like in the first book or the first movie, that like troll is a bit dated now, right? But like,
sure, yeah.
I do like that limitation. Yeah. But like I like the limiting I always find the same thing, like, you know, like Christopher Nolan movies where it's just like low key CGI, go all in on
like that's on it. It's like 99% CGI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, because you get to a point of like, am I just watching a cartoon? Like,
right? Am I just watching an animated movie? Like, yeah.
And you see those behind the scenes clips of like how they film it, and you're like, oh my god, I'm more impressed by your acting skills now that I see like.
Right.
What you were working with as you filmed this scene, because
you're acting against a stick.
Yeah, exactly.
Like fully in like a Green Man suit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, how do you even keep a straight face?
Right.
Or like, did you know that Daenerys from Game of Thrones, when she's like petting her dragon, it's a green ball on an elastic string that she's like holding when she looks like she's cupping its face or whatever. It's pretty crazy.
That's so funny.
But yeah, I thought it was funny. I found out today that the second movie, so the first movie came out in 2001. The second movie came out in 2002, just 1 year after the first movie.
Wow.
Isn't that insane? Like, how do you put
film
that?
them like concurrently, 1 and 2, like just back to back? I don't see how you could get it done otherwise.
I'm like, I don't think they had enough, like, because with the first movie, you're kind of like risking
Winging
a lot.
it.
Like,
Yeah.
Once you get that first movie as a hit, then you can go, hey, like we can greenlit 20 different movies now. But before you know that, I just don't see them doing concurrently 2 movies. I guess they did it with Lord of the Rings before that was a hit, but I don't know. Well, I am so sorry. This has been so much fun so far, and I'm like, I gotta go. I literally just want to stay here though.
It's all good. Don't make the wife get mad at you.
Well, thank you so much.
Nice meeting you.
Okay, later. Maybe one day you'll let me back on. I promise I'm gonna clear my whole day. Okay.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? So Chamber of Secrets came out in November 14th, 2002. And Sorcerer's Stone right here came out November 16th, 2001.
And then they took 3 years to get the third one out. Interesting. They must have filmed the first one back to back, first and second back to back.
Well, so this would be like 1.5 years after Chamber, because that's the third one.
Because like in movie
and then the fourth one came out a year after that. How are they getting these movies done in a year?
That's what I'm saying. And like, I feel like once you get to movie 3, Prisoner of Azkaban, they look older, as if there had been more time. Where movie 1 and 2, it seemed like they were filmed at once. With like how they look age wise.
Yeah, those kids grew up fast. Like. It's wild.
Says, I wonder if it's cheaper that way because of the cost of flights. It could be that, and like the filming locations, and you've got to move the equipment all the time, and you're paying the actors. It could just be easier to plan everything like in one go for the first two. Especially because they're supposed to be so young in books 1 and 2, and kids that age can age so quickly. So maybe that's why they did it. If they did it right.
Yeah, I wonder if they were all just filmed like back to back to back. Because I bet there was something, something they had to have been thinking about is like, we have 7 movies to get through.
Yeah.
And we need to keep these kids like as young as possible to like get through all of these movies on time so that they don't look like
too old.
30-year-old high school students. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
actually a very good point, Spencer. It's a very good point.
Okay, so going back to Harry Potter here, we kind of talked about it, I think, before the show, but I really love the idea that Harry is struggling with the idea or the possibility that he should have been in Slytherin. And I think that is such a good plot point because I read through, the first book. And I remember thinking like, oh man, like, well, why did the Hat want him to be in Slytherin? Like what is it about Harry where he was like, oh, you should go into Slytherin? Are we going to find out about that later? And so I was really happy when we got to book 2 and it was like, oh, this is a legitimate concern of Harry's. And it makes it look like, I don't know, did he belong in Slytherin? And then by the end of the book, you're like, confident that he should have been in Gryffindor, but I liked that tension there. That was good.
See, I thought like the way that they did it, where he puts the hat on the one time, and he's asking the Sorting Hat, the question of like, well, why didn't you put me in Slytherin? And I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he takes it off before the Hat finishes his answer, and I was like, no, he's going to tell you. Why? He put you in Gryffindor over Slytherin. Why did you rip it off?
Oh, yeah, because he got, like, frustrated or whatever.
Yeah. And I was like, no, like, for me, it was almost a little more frustrating where I was like, no, dude, he's trying to tell you, like, why.
Right.
He's saying, like, I thought it was like you could have been a leader, like, you know, leaders might tend to be in Slytherin or something along that lines. But
yeah,
you know, it's all about the path and journey we choose for ourselves. Do you want to go this way or do you want to go this way? And that was going to be the explanation. So that was actually frustrating for me with Harry.
Yeah, definitely. What did you think of Ginny? This is her first time really in the spotlight, and she'll continue to be more in the spotlight in later books. What'd you think of her?
I thought it was great. You know, even though I knew the movies, like, it was not something I would have seen coming. You know, with her huge role it ended up being, you know, like towards the, or really throughout the book, but you don't know it, and you only find out at the end how large her role really was. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was intentionally overshadowed initially, making it look like she was just obsessed with Harry. And so to find out later, I felt when Hagrid says that his chickens or his roosters had all been killed. Yeah. And I didn't realize that when they had said, you know, Ginny had been hanging around here, Hagrid's hut, we thought that she was just looking for you. But you later realized why she had actually been there. That was a really fun twist for me, even though I had watched the movies.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I really like Ginny in the books. I think the actress in the movies is probably a great actress, and she looks just like how I picture Ginny. But I think it probably just wasn't the best role for her. I think she just like didn't quite fit like who Ginny is. And so there was definitely there was definitely some like awkward moments.
I felt like she was supposed to be really awkward.
Well, yeah, but I just mean like
as a bad actress,
like acting alongside Daniel. He's like acting circles around her, and she's just like very like wooden and stiff the way she like delivers her lines. But she definitely gets better in the movies. But I still think it probably would have been best with a different actress, because it's so, we were talking about this on the last episode of Potter Watch. You know, you watch these movies and you're like, dude, these kids are like 10, 11, 12, and they're such good actors and actresses. Like, oh my God. So I think it's just her being alongside these kids who are like just already very, very good actors. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like Harry, Hermione, Ron, they all perfectly encapsulated like the book characters. Like to a T, the book came to life through the three of them. It was that was definitely like perfect casting.
Yeah. Any other general thoughts on this book before I go into some fun facts?
Can I say one of my favorite things from book one? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Surprisingly, shockingly, I found one of the most heartfelt moments that I've thought of over and over again since I finished book one to be when, you know, Ron and Harry kind of really did not like Hermione in the beginning for the first half of book one. But I really loved when they fight the troll in the bathroom, and it ends the chapter with like, and from that moment on, Harry and Ron were friends with Hermione. How could you not after you fight a troll together? And I don't know what it was. It just like pulled at my heartstrings. I was like,
yes, I know exactly. I brought this up in the last episode. I thought it was such a great moment where it's just like,
just done in such a great way, and it, like so simple. Just like, well, how could you not be friends after you fight a troll together? And I was like, oh.
It's just such a pure and wholesome moment. It's like, oh, this is the beginning of like the golden trio. Like, it's so great.
Like, it just felt meant to be. And like, you know, because look at it, how otherwise if they hadn't had this moment together, would they have ever become really close friends in an organic, you know, sense? And because they were thrown into this moment together, and then they were like, all right, well, I guess we like her now. I was like, oh, I love that.
Right. Oh, last thing I'll say, or I guess a couple things real quick before we move into the fun facts about like the publication and stuff, is Audible in America now has put out the UK versions of the Harry Potter audiobooks, and they are so much better than the US ones. Like, the
Really?
US ones aren't bad, but the UK one is just so good that it's like leagues ahead
And there's
of like.
differences, right? With like
Mhm.
the words they use, like American versus like UK.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a little bit different words here and there. But also like the American ones, they had like this really derpy music that didn't fit Harry Potter like at
Hmm.
all. Like it wasn't like this orchestral like magical music. It was like do 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 do. It was just like I hated
That a
it.
Mario theme song.
Yeah. and and like the guy that did the voices was fine for the most part, but he could not do like women's voices to save his life. And so that was always like really like, oh, this doesn't sound great. But
It's funny you say that because sometimes with audiobooks, I like when they pick like when it's going back and forth from a female to male narration, they
hmm,
actually change the person doing the audiobook. And I've
right.
had some where they don't, and I'm like, "Ugh, it's taking me out of it. Like you're not doing a good opposite sex of what you are voice."
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, some people just can't do it very well. But this guy, Stephen Fry, who does the UK audiobooks, he does a fantastic job, and they're so amazing. Nova agrees with something. I'm not sure what.
The narration, I'm guessing.
um, but yeah, so there's that, and then also I just wanted to show everybody. We looked at my Mina Lima edition earlier, right? And I also wanted to show you guys that I was at a used bookstore recently, and I found just the most amazing thing.
Spencer
It
texted
is
me the other day.
it is a first edition Harry Potter, first printing. It's the Canadian edition, but
Oh,
yeah, look at this. You can see,
first edition though. That's insane.
yeah, it's first edition and first printing, and you can tell by the. I hope the camera will pick it up, but there's like numbers down here that show you. Uh, I don't know if anybody can see
Mhm.
that, but yeah, it blew my mind. I was like, I don't know like exactly how much this is worth, but it's certainly more than $15 that I paid for it. So,
I had a really good laugh at. So we have a group chat, me, Spencer, and Gabe, for anyone who doesn't
mhm.
know. And I was thanking Spencer for putting me onto the Mina Lima books because I was like, I don't know if I ever would have gotten into Harry Potter if I hadn't had this to like kickstart, my interest in it. I was like, I love you, thank you. And then Spencer goes, yeah, I hope they put out the rest soon. And I go, excuse me? They're not all out yet? And I immediately go, you know what? I take that back, Spencer. I might hate you now.
Yeah, yeah, I think
Only because Goblet of Fire is probably the one I most would want to have like
yeah.
but I think everything after that I will be fine with because they
Mhm.
do get more like adult in the later books. But
Yeah,
I really want to see this version of Goblet
right.
of Fire.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think they'll be coming soon. I mean, these books have made them so much money.
Hmm.
Matter of fact, I didn't even know who Mina Lima was before these,
No, me neither.
and so I think it's really like skyrocketed them. So I wouldn't be surprised if more are coming really soon. Okay, so let's go into some fun facts about the publication. We did this last time where I looked at some facts about what it looked like for J.K. Rowling around the writing of the book and how hard it was to get published, and her having to change her name from Joanne to J.K. Rowling because they were afraid that a like a
Yeah.
female author wouldn't bring in like the boys who wanted to read the book, because the publisher was like, oh well, it seems like a lot of boys are going to want to read this, and we're afraid that they won't read it if
It says
it's got a.
Joanne. Yeah.
Right, yeah, exactly. Which she was fine with, and she said that she really doesn't mind the J.K. Rowling thing, but it was interesting just to kind of go through and see all of the interesting facts around it. I watched some interviews where she had a cardboard box that had the entire series outlined in it. It was just stacks and stacks and stacks of papers where she had like outlined the entire story all the way through from the first book. And that was before she had even written the second book. She had this all outlined way ahead of time. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So there's some cool facts to check out here. One of them is in an interview with J.K. Rowling and Steve Kloves, who is the movie writer. This is right as the second movie was coming out. He mentioned that it was really hard to write the movies because at the time the rest of the books hadn't been written yet, so he didn't know what scenes were going to be like super important to the later books. Yeah, and she would only tell him like little bits and pieces of information. She wasn't willing to like tell him the entire story because, you know, what if something crappy happened and he knows the rest of the story of Harry Potter, you know what I mean?
Or God forbid she like changed something later in one of the final books and it wasn't as important, or something really important had been overlooked. So
right. Well, he was like, yeah, it's just super difficult to write the rest of the movies when you don't know where the story is going. And when you think about any other like series that's been adapted, besides, I guess, like Game of Thrones, it's like, you know, all of Divergent or whatever would come out, and then the movies were made of it. Or like all of Twilight, or like most of Twilight came out, and then they started making movies. And so it's kind of unusual to have 2 books out and then start doing your movies, and by the time you get to the second movie you have maybe like 3 books out or 4 books out. And so he really didn't have much of like a way to look ahead, and I thought that was really interesting. He said it was like a pretty big like frustration of his, which I totally get.
Yeah, I can agree. It's like putting myself in his shoes. I'd be like, no, like you need to tell me.
Yeah, it needs some
give me some indication of where this story is going, what the end game is.
Yeah, and so then another note I have here is when I watched an interview with her from 1998, she said that she had all the books outlined except for book 5. And all the way back in 1998, this is when the second book had just come out or was about to come out, she said she's like, if there's a gap in between 4 and 5, that's why. And sure enough, if you go forward in the timeline, there was a 3.5-year gap in between books 4 and 5, which is the longest gap in the entire series in between books. I'm like, man, she knew way back then that like she had everything so planned out that she knew there was going to be this big publication gap in between 4 and 5.
And what was the reasoning for the big publication gap?
Just because
I'm writing it.
Well, she just didn't have 5 outlined. Like, she didn't know exactly what she wanted to do with it. She knew what she wanted to do up to book 4.
And which one is book 5?
Book 5 is Order of the Phoenix, where that really bad Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher comes in, and she's, like, ruling over the school, basically. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so, yeah, so she knew what she wanted to do up to that point, and then she knew what 6 and 7 were going to be, but she just didn't know how to connect these two parts of the story together. And so she's like, yeah, there might be a big gap in between 4 and 5, and there was. I think that's so crazy that she was just able to predict that.
Yeah.
So then J.K. Rowling was terrified that the second book could not live up to the success of the first one. And after giving it over to the publisher, she recalled it for another 6 weeks to work on it. After giving like the final draft of her publisher, she was like, no, give it back.
Remorse, like, no, give it back.
Right. But however, her fears were kind of put to rest, because once it was published, it immediately took first place in the UK bestseller list. This is her second book. It's not like this is like a book of like a well-established series. This is her second book. It takes first place in the UK bestseller list, and it displaces popular authors like John Grisham, Tom Clancy, and Terry Pratchett. I think that's wild. And it made Rowling the first author to win the British Book Awards Children's Book of the Year for 2 years in a row. And then it doesn't stop there. In June 1999, it went straight to the top of 3 U.S. bestseller lists, including the New York Times. And I'm just like, what a year. Like, holy crap.
Yeah.
You're like taking out other like well-established authors who are always at the top of the charts. Oh man, that had to be so validating. That had to be so amazing. I can only imagine.
Right. And at least she had like a plan from the beginning where like, you look at like George R. R. Martin and Patrick Rothfuss, you know, where you're like, they had these books take off and they did not have like the full outline, or at least like a vague outline planned of what they wanted like the overarching like arc to be in general. And so I do appreciate an author who has a plan and, you know, finishes it.
Right. Yeah, she even said in that interview, and I don't know if I would totally agree with her on this, because I've definitely read books that were not completely outlined and were still like amazing books. But she said in that interview, she's like, because I think the question was like, what piece of advice would you give to someone who's like learning to write or like wanting to write their own book? She was like, you cannot have a good, like a really, really good story if you don't outline. She's like, you have to outline to keep it all cohesive and to have a goal in mind. You can't just like sit down and write. And I would say that I probably agree with like half of that. I would say the books that I've probably enjoyed the most were completely outlined. Like the author was like a big planner and they just got everything like nailed down. But some of my other favorite books were like, pantser books as well, where they just like write as they go along. And I think a lot of indie books are kind of pantsed to where they're not like outlined a whole lot. And I don't know. I don't know enough about the process to make like a definitive argument on it. But I do know that, like, Lies of Locke Lamora, that whole book, that took him years to outline that book.
Like book one?
Yeah, just book one. It took him, like, years of working on it and outlining meticulously to make that book work as well as it does. And so I think, you see the results when you do outline, I think.
Well, I like to think of like, spoiler alert coming, Game of Thrones, like Hodor, Hold the Door is just like, to me, one of the top, breadcrumbing through a book, like from book one and like in book 5 or whatever. Did we even find out in the books? Did we only find out in the show, actually? It's been
I haven't read them
since I've done a Game of Thrones reread, because I used to do it frequently thinking like we were getting another book. And now I'm like, oh, F this. Like, I don't think we're ever getting one. But I did love in the show the reveal of like Hodor was just like, because of Hold the Door, it was this whole like throwback. And it's kind of like the gold standard to me of like someone who planned so far in advance for something that like they planned for something to be revealed in book 5.
Yeah.
You know about it in book 1 and you don't even realize what you know. So I kind
Have you read the Dresden Files?
I have not.
Dude, if you like that kind of stuff, you would love the Dresden Files. Okay. There's stuff that gets revealed like past book 10 that is like a callback and foreshadowing from book 1, and it is like, it's one of the most
love that stuff.
Oh man, it's so good. Okay, so then another kind of fun fact here is, in early drafts of the second book, Nearly Headless Nick had his own poem/song that explained his situation. And I was like, I gotta see what this is. And it got taken out because the publisher just wasn't like jiving with it or whatever. I wish she had kept it in, because when I initially looked it up, I saw it and I was like, that's too long to read on the podcast. But then I read it, Sam, and I'm like, we need to look at this on the podcast.
Okay.
Because it is so funny. I was laughing so hard reading this. Okay. It was a mistake that any wizard could make who is tired and caught on the hop. One piffling error, and then to my terror, I found myself facing the chop. Alas for the eve when I met Lady Grieve, a-strolling the park in the dusk. She was of the belief I could straighten her teeth. Next moment she'd sprouted a tusk. I cried through the night that I'd soon put her right, but the process of justice was lax. They'd brought out the block, though they'd mislaid the rock, where they usually sharpened the axe. Next morning at dawn, with a face most forlorn, the priest said to try not to cry. You can come just like that, no you won't need a hat, and I knew that my end must be nigh. The man in the mask, who would have the sad task of cleaving my head from my neck, said, Nick, if you please, will you get to your knees? And I turned to a gibbering wreck. This may sting a bit, said the cack-handed twit as he swung the axe up in the air. But oh, the blunt blade, no difference it made. My head was still definitely there.
Oh my god.
Oh my god, I'm crying. The Axeman, the Axeman he hacked and whacked and he thwacked. Won't be too long, he assured me. But quick it was not, and the bone-headed clot took 45 goes till he floored me.
Oh,
And so I was dead, but my faithful old head, it never saw fit to desert me. It still lingers on, that's the end of my song, and now please applaud or you'll hurt me.
why didn't they include that? Why wouldn't they include that?
Oh my god.
That was
I don't know. Isn't that so good? I'm like, oh,
It
it's
feels
so
like
funny.
appropriate for like how the rest of the book was. It would have fit in.
Right?
Wow, did not know that.
Oh my god. It was so brilliant. I was reading that earlier and just dying. And yeah, it got super dark. Yeah. So I just had to share that with everybody because that was hilarious. Okay, cool. So then we're going to move on to talking about Dumbledore's big plan. And I had kind of wished that we had more people here to bounce ideas off of.
At least we always usually disagree. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah, for sure.
The opposite sides.
Yeah. So for anybody that doesn't know, Dumbledore's big plan is this popular... I hesitate to even call it a theory. Like, it's called the Dumbledore's big plan theory. But, so we're told in book 7, when Dumbledore is talking with Snape, and we're kind of getting this behind-the-scenes moment with the two of them, and Snape is, like, asking Dumbledore all these questions, and Dumbledore reveals that he has, since the very beginning, since Harry Potter was born... he had known the prophecy regarding him and knew that Harry was going to be this person that would eventually defeat the Dark Lord. And so Dumbledore has moved things around in Harry's life to, I guess, push him into being the man that he needs to become Voldemort, or to become to become the defeater of Voldemort. And so the theory isn't really like, does Dumbledore have a big plan? Because it says on the page that he does, and we know some of the steps he took to make it work. The theory comes in where you're trying to figure out what parts of the story is Dumbledore engineering. And so whenever, you know, on a second read now, this will be my I think my first reread, besides a couple here and there that I picked up in the last year. But like my whole thing as I'm going through it this time is like I want to look and try to find the little ways that Dumbledore is like making moves and like trying to get Harry to where he needs to be. And in the last episode, I talked about how Dumbledore had left the door open to the Mirror of Erised and given Harry the cloak so that Harry could like sneak through the halls and go find the mirror. And, then Dumbledore was like sitting there watching him to see like what Harry saw in the mirror because he wanted to know what is Harry's deepest desire. Because at this point, Dumbledore...
he see what Harry was seeing? Because I thought you couldn't see what others were seeing.
No, he couldn't see it, but he could judge from Harry's reaction. And Harry was very like vocal about it. Like when he brought Ron back and stuff, he was like, "I see my parents."
That's true. You didn't see my parents? That's right. I forgot.
Yeah. And, Dumbledore out here playing God. That's right. He kind of does. Like, I think... So here's the thing. We had on a couple guests last week that were like, they had read the books when they were very young. And they were like, no, Dumbledore is like this great man. Like, he's not engineering anything. He's not, like, doing all these, like, shady maneuvers. And I think... it takes someone who is like coming into the series at like an older age. I'm not coming in with any preconceptions of Dumbledore. And so when I see him making these moves, I'm like, oh yeah, he's like socially engineering all this stuff. That makes sense to me.
He's playing the puppet master.
Yeah. And so I think that it's not like, I don't have this idea that he's like this amazing guy. I mean, he is like, I love Dumbledore, but I don't think I came in with this preconception of like this child like, oh no, when I was young I saw Dumbledore and he was like the best or whatever. He certainly like has flaws. Yeah, he's got his like moral grayness to some extent. And so yeah, the last episode we kind of not got into it, but we had like a bit of a back and forth about Dumbledore's big plan, and it kind of ended with the other guests being on the side where it's like, no, Dumbledore doesn't have a big plan. And it's like, well, it says in book 7 that he does. Like, it says right on the page.
The whole plan is, Harry's also a Horcrux, right?
Yeah.
And
yeah.
You have to destroy the Horcruxes to destroy... I'm confused how they wouldn't see it in...
Yeah, because I mean, like, Dumbledore... at bare minimum, he knew from the very beginning that Harry would need to die. Like, that's the only way that Voldemort dies.
Yeah, like, he didn't care about Harry, but it's looking at it as, like, what is the ultimate good for everyone?
Right, yeah.
Let me care for this child while I can, but I know that eventually, to end this evil, we will have to... Yeah. That's how I look at it. But again, we're movie watchers first. So we don't have that like only view of him through the lens as like the man who's been helping Harry the whole time. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
That's really interesting to think of it that way. As like we kind of knew because we watched the movies. So reading the books, we see like I play chess. I love to play chess. And like where it's like the long con of like the long game. And yeah, like I see what Dumbledore is doing, and I don't think it's mutually exclusive that he can care for him, but also know that like in the end, what's best for everyone would be to take Harry down. Right,
exactly. And so then Dumbledore's plan as it pertains to this book, I have 3 points that are things that he does in this book as part of his plan. Mm-hmm. The first one, and by far the most important, I guess you could argue 1 and 3 either one could be the most important. Mm-hmm. But what I think is the most important is keeping Harry's ego in check. And he does this by bringing in Lockhart to show Harry the... what fame can do to you, like if it goes to your head. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so he's kind of trying to show Harry, like, you don't want to be this guy. Like, you don't want to be this bumbling idiot who's only just obsessed with himself. And Dumbledore is worried that Harry could become that, because imagine if in your first year of school everybody knows your name and you are instantly the most popular and well-known person in the entire community. Like, you, not only that, but you are also known for defeating one of the most evil wizards to have ever existed.
As a baby.
Like, yeah, like, of course that would has
He's
the
really
yeah, that has the potential to go to your head so hard. And then when you later on we learn about Harry's dad and like Sirius and all of like their friends, and like, as much as I love them, like, they were arrogant little guys. Like, they were super like Mr. Popular and like bullying people and all sorts of stuff. And so I think Dumbledore is worried that Harry has some of that in him, and he's worried that Harry might take after his father. But I think because Harry really never knew his father and he grew up in such a humble home, like, not that the Dursleys are humble, but like he was like abused for like his entire childhood. I think he doesn't really have like a big head on his shoulders. And, we see that in the first book where Harry is like, he sees that Ron is hungry and he's like, I'm going to go buy everything at the snack bar and give you all this food because that's...
I'm not going to be friends with Draco. Like, you seem like an asshole. But that's interesting because the whole time I was reading the book, my one thought was like, why would they have ever hired, what's his name? Lockhart. I was like, why are they hiring him? He's not teaching them anything. He's egotistical to the extreme, blah, 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 blah. But now that you said it in the way of it was a lesson for Harry, I'm like, oh my God. It all just clicked for me in the last 30 seconds since you said that.
Right? It was literally all just a lesson for Harry. Isn't that crazy?
It's all coming together in my head. And it was like something I put on my phone as like a note of like, I need to ask, like, why the hell did the school employ him? They had to know he was not teaching them anything whatsoever.
Yep.
But now that you're saying it in that context, I'm like, oh my God, it makes total sense.
Because the stakes are so big, right? It's not like, oh, I'm going to pull all these strings just to teach this kid a lesson. It's like, this kid is like the savior of everyone. Like, we have to make sure that he learns the lessons that he needs to learn, because in 6 years he's going to have to, he's going to have to be pure of heart when he goes into that grotto and faces Voldemort. Like, he has to be the only way for this to work is for him to know that he's going to die and to legitimately be okay with it. And so he really has to like shape Harry into this person that he needs him to be.
That's interesting.
And so the stakes are high.
Yeah. In my rewatch of the movie this morning, I actually thought it was really interesting when Harry goes to Dumbledore for the first time in his office and he's telling him about the Firebird, and he's like, they can carry really heavy weights. And I forget what the other thing was that he mentioned. And I was
They're
like,
extremely loyal and faithful.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, now I realize like how much this is like giving you the end of the movie. What I mean? Yep. But first time around, it was just like a throwaway line to me and I didn't pay attention. And so that was interesting. But I had never, I'm like at the moment currently going through my head and reorganizing my thoughts on everything because now it's making sense to me.
Yeah. So now when you go into, as you go into like book 3 and 4 or whatever, like look at what Dumbledore is doing throughout. And then at the end, like look back on it and be like, okay, so what was the purpose of having Lupin be the Defense Against the Dark Arts next year? Like what is he doing with that? Because he's doing something with each
It's all teacher. In preparation for it's like trials in a way.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's sold as like oh, he just like couldn't find anybody else to do it. But Dumbledore is the most famous wizard in the world. He's probably the most powerful wizard in the world next to Voldemort, and like he has connections. Like he's not lacking options for this teacher. Like he is putting teachers in for very specific reasons. And yeah, it's awesome. I love thinking about that stuff.
Yeah.
The other thing that Dumbledore taught Harry, well, so this is debatable. I don't think that this is like explicitly on the page or anything, but it's a theory that people hold, so I'm including it. The other part of his plan for this year was to get Harry to learn Expelliarmus, because this is the first book where Harry learns that and it becomes his signature spell. And my thinking is that Dumbledore needed Harry to have a spell that was not explicitly violent. It let him stop, or it lets Harry stop, confrontation before it can turn into violence, because it's just a disarming thing. It also kind of like throws them back a little bit or whatever, and it keeps people off of Harry while not like seriously harming them. And I think Dumbledore needed that to be Harry's signature thing, because Harry's soul could not be stained when he eventually goes to fight Voldemort. He couldn't have like maliciously killed someone in anger and still done that with Voldemort. So I think it's worth thinking about. I don't know if Dumbledore like actually planned for him to learn Expelliarmus, but it is an interesting story beat when you think about like, oh, Harry couldn't have learned like a fire spell and used that in combat and then still gone in with a clean soul to face Voldemort. Like, he had to have like a blank slate of morality when he goes in there.
It's interesting because like I watched the movies first, obviously, and I want to say like after Goblet of Fire is when the movies get really confusing for me. And I've always thought where I'm like, if I read it, this would make so much more sense to me.
It will, for sure.
Happening would make so much more sense. And so that's why, you're talking about things that are like later on. And I'm like,
sure,
these are things that like go over my head. And that's why I'm so glad you have gotten me into like reading the books, because I really want to read the next one, Prisoner of Azkaban, so bad, but I need to finish my 700-page block book 2 for next Sunday. So I didn't even take the wrapping off of the book yet, because I'm like, if I do, I won't like,
right.
I'll be behind. I have to do this, but I am like on board. I want to keep reading. I am like, the books are adding so much more context to everything, and they've made me enjoy the movies more.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I understand the motivations and the context and the background story so much more now. So
definitely. Yeah,
I'm very grateful to you for that, Spencer.
Yeah, it literally, like, when I started reading Harry Potter, I was just like, look at what I've been missing. Like, it was one of those like light bulb moments, like, I did not know this series was this deep. Like, holy crap.
Oh, this, like, what I thought was a little throwaway scene actually is very important to the context of, like, the later plot line.
Right, yeah, for sure.
Same.
So yeah, then the third and last thing that is part of Dumbledore's plan for the year is cementing Harry's loyalty and trust to himself, Dumbledore. And we kind of see this pop up through the book where Dumbledore will sit him down and he'll be like, is there anything you want to tell me? And Harry's like, nope, everything's good.
And he's such a bad liar. He's such a bad liar.
I know, right? And it's just like Dumbledore's like, and he eventually tells him, when he's in Hagrid's hut, he looks directly at where Harry is like invisible, and he's like, anyone will have help at Hogwarts if you're loyal to me. Like, I will always give help to anyone who asks. Oh. And it's this moment where it's like, Harry, you just need to trust him. And then at the end, when Harry is fighting the basilisk, he's physically showing his faith in Dumbledore, and Fawkes comes in, and Tom Riddle is trying to get him like onto his side, and Harry's like, no, like, basically he doesn't say this explicitly, but he's like, I'm on the side of Dumbledore, I'm on the side of Hogwarts. and Fox comes in and brings the hat, and then Godric Gryffindor's sword shows up, and it's literally a physical manifestation of what Dumbledore was saying earlier, where he's like, if you trust me and if you're loyal to me, like, I will help you. And it's literally like that being enacted in front of Harry's eyes. And so I kind of love how much of a theme that is in this book.
Can I give a counter argument to that theme?
Yeah.
As someone who not only comes on your podcast all the time, I go on another podcast all the time. It's called Liz Explains. It's another Patreon. And she does a lot of pop culture stuff, like not like celebrity, whatever. It's like, what's the new like documentary that's out? You know, blah 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 blah. I've done a lot.
Yeah.
What were we just talking about? My whole point. Oh, is where you're saying like Dumbledore's like, no, listen to me. Like I know, blah, blah, blah. It reminds me very much of like the cult documentaries that I watch.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, no, you know, I'm a leader and you believe in what I say. So follow everything I do and you're going to be okay. And so I struggled with that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure.
In just a way where it's like, no. And I mean, even Dumbledore says later in the book, where like, good thing you didn't listen to me, essentially, because like sometimes it pays to not listen to someone, which is the opposite of listen to me, do what I say.
I think the specific word that they use in the book is loyalty. And by that, I don't think he's telling Harry, you know, listen to everything I say, like do everything I say. I don't think he's saying, let me give you orders. Matter of fact, he's actually kind of letting Harry have free reign because he knows that because he knows that the prophecy is going to play out if he just lets Harry do his thing. And that's why at the end, when Harry, you know, they have the book that he like stabbed, and he asks Dumbledore, he's like, can I have that book? I'm sure somewhere inside Dumbledore's head, he's like, I'd actually like to hang on to this. But he knows that if he lets Harry do what Harry is supposed to do, like the prophecy will play out. And so he lets Harry take the book, and he's like, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. It's all part of the prophecy. And so I think that Dumbledore isn't necessarily saying, do exactly what I tell you to do. He's more so saying, be on the side of me. Be on the side of Hogwarts, of good. Like, don't go over to, like, Tom Riddle's side. If you show loyalty to the good side and to the Hogwarts side, I will always support you in that. And so I think that's mostly his message, more so than, like, trying to like, control him.
Later, what, like, you know, his whole game plan was, it's like, all right, was he not trying to not control, but like he was trying to guide him in
for sure
direction. And something like I've always had an issue with in like any book or show I've watched with prophecies, it's like no matter what you do, it is towards the end goal game of whatever the prophecy is. So it doesn't matter what you do. You know what I mean?
I think you'll see, because the movies don't really talk about the prophecy a whole lot, but the books talk about it quite a bit. And I think what you'll see as you read them is the prophecy is very malleable. Like it's not like this
set in stone.
Right, yeah, it's not like this is the prophecy, it's gonna happen. It's like they still have to like make the right choices in alignment with the prophecy for it to all come to fruition. But there are certainly like branching paths where Harry could have done something different and it would have like not killed Voldemort in the end.
Have you watched the Loki show on Disney?
No, I'm so tired of all the Marvel stuff.
I absolutely understand, but my point is that in the Marvel show and Loki, it's all about like the main timeline. And anytime someone does something that's like not supposed to be for the main timeline, they branch off to these different timelines, but how like the little change can eventually lead to all these other branches, you know? So I find that interesting in the sense of this, where Dumbledore is kind of, he's not trying to make him go that way, but he is trying to herd him in the
Mm-hmm.
direction
That's
of,
a really good way to put it. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
it's not terrible, you know, like he's not
Yeah.
making him do anything.
And that's why I love, I think when people think about Harry Potter, they don't think about the word morally gray doesn't come up when you think of Harry Potter, but when you actually look at like the
Mhm.
entire storyline as a whole and like what the characters are doing inside of it, there's a lot of really good morally gray stuff. Like not just like cheesy like, oh, you have to choose between saving this friend and this friend. It's like actually like big scale, like, is this okay to like raise a child to die if it saves everybody? Like those kind of questions.
It's like that
Oh, they're
answer
so
baby
good.
question, you know, where they're like, if you met baby Hitler, would you murder him? And people get like
Right.
all out of whack and sorts on like, how do we answer this moral question? And I kind of
Yeah.
see the similar parallels in it of,
Right.
is it nature versus nurture?
Right. For sure.
Who's your biggest influence during like your formative years? And Harry was very lucky to have Dumbledore, because look at what happened to
Yeah.
Hagrid, where that was bull that he was expelled and they took away his wand, even though they didn't, you know, really take it away. Where it's like, also who's leading the charge and who's in charge of everyone. And that really pissed me off, because I was like, if Hagrid had gone to school when Dumbledore was the headmaster,
Yeah.
he would have never been expelled.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Tom Riddle
These
says, like, Dumbledore as a teacher during that time never, you know, was, I could tell he was never comfortable around me. He didn't buy like the shtick that I was trying to put out. And I found that really interesting.
Yeah, that was cool. We'll get a lot more Tom Riddle stuff, like seeing his like younger self and stuff as the books go on. Those are some of my favorite moments of Dumbledore, just seeing
Mm-hmm.
how he handled a young Tom Riddle. It's really
Mm-hmm.
interesting. But yeah, those are kind of like the main points of Dumbledore's big plan for this book. I think the biggest one for me is Lockhart. Putting him in a position to show Harry what fame does to you, because I think Harry really needed that after the highs of the first book. Like he is, even at the beginning of the book, he's like the most popular person ever, and then at the end, having defeated evil again, like
It's humbling.
yeah, he needed to be like humbled a little bit, I think.
I thought the books did so much better of a job than the movie did with, like, in regards to how people really thought Harry was the heir of Slytherin. I don't know what it was for me personally, where in the movie I didn't realize the pressure
That
that
people
was
thought
being,
that,
yeah,
yeah.
that they thought it was him. And reading the book, like a difference between the book and the movie, like when he overhears the kids in the library talking about
Hmm.
him, in the books he goes up and confronts them and he's like, that
Yeah.
is not what I was doing, like I am not a part of this. In the movie he just kind of like slithers away and doesn't say
Right.
anything. So that was really big for me reading the books for the first time, being like,
Yep.
oh, putting myself in his shoes and being like, imagine being at school and everyone thinks you're the one that's like
Yeah.
freezing these people, petrifying these people, and you happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time every single time. So it's
Yeah.
not adding any credence to your innocence, like in any way. So I actually enjoyed that much more in the books than I ever did
Yeah.
the movie. And I felt like once I read the book, I enjoyed it more in the movie,
Yeah.
knowing what I knew.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any characters so far in the books that you're enjoying more than the movie characters? Or like having seen the movies first, is there any like additional context for any characters that you're like, oh, this is actually a cool character?
I go back and forth on a lot of them, just because, like, who's like my main one? Like Snape. Like I know that later on,
Yeah.
right, you find out that Snape is, he was in love with Harry's mother and blah 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 blah. And I've
Yeah.
been really struggling with like, what is the justification going to be for the way he's treated Harry this whole time?
Oh, you'll see. Yeah, that's something you don't see in the movies.
And that's what I
man.
like struggled with. I'm like, they didn't give a good enough explanation in the movies of like, that didn't seem protective to me. It seemed like you hated him and you wanted him out of the school. And so I'm hoping that through the books, I'll get more of Snape's backstory and that type of stuff. But that's just been something that's been stuck in my mind the whole time. I'm like, why is Snape such a goddamn asshole to Harry?
He definitely has his reasons. I wouldn't say they're like valid. Like, I don't think you should ever treat a child the way that he's treated Harry, but you definitely learn a lot more about Snape and what it was like being in school with Harry's dad.
Like, to answer your original question, I would say no, I haven't thought of anyone higher than they've been portrayed. I've actually thought of them like lesser than they've been portrayed. A lot of the people I'm like, oh, you really actually kind of suck. Like, I actually don't know how to justify the things that I thought I could justify for you before. Especially with the Lockhart thing. Until you cleared it up for me, I'm like, listen, Harry, this is what you could turn into if you let it go to your head. I just did not understand why the school not only hired him, but like continued allowing him to teach children. You know, his first class, he gives them a test on all of these stupid questions about himself. Like, what does that have to do with defense of the dark arts? I get it's a hard position to fill. All the people keep like dying or whatever at your school in this position. That was a really big frustration for me. And I have a lot of trouble separating myself from like reality versus books. So like I look at this if I'm Harry and I'm like, like you're being an asshole for no reason. So I would say if anything, I looked at people as less than I looked at anyone as better than I had originally thought of them.
Yeah. I think for me the difference that I noticed from the movies to the books is like one thing I remembered from when I originally saw the movies, I was like, oh, Ron is kind of this like derpy guy that just kind of like tags along and like doesn't do anything, but he's like their friend or whatever. But actually in the movies, a lot of the things that Hermione does in the movies are actually Ron's parts. They're actually like Ron's like, oh, Ron figured that out, or Ron did that thing. And they had Hermione do it in the movies because they wanted Ron to be like the comic relief derpy guy.
Yeah.
And then as you go through the books, you're like, oh, Ron is actually like really smart and like clever and brave, and like you wouldn't necessarily know that from the movies.
That's interesting because like of what I've read of the book so far, he kept telling them to stop reading that like journal or whatever, trying to figure out what was going on with the journal. And I always kind of felt like Ron was the foil, at least so far, where like he kept trying to stop them from actually, not intentionally, but like he was just like, this doesn't matter, whatever. And it turned out to be like the biggest plot point, you know what I mean? But that's good to know that like later maybe he becomes more believable, I guess, or like intelligent.
Right, for sure.
Yeah, he's one of the biggest character struggles I have of a love-hate. Like it can go back and forth at any moment.
Okay, interesting. I'm curious to see how you'll feel about him later on.
That's what I'm saying. I think like, you know, we're still reading of them as like young kids.
Right, yeah.
Well, like definitely. I can forgive a lot of this for now. But at a later date, if you keep trying to like shut down things that later become like the key plot point of solving our problem, I'm going to be like, you're a moron. Like, get out of here.
Yeah. So I guess going from here into like a deeper discussion where we're pulling like specific like plot beats or scenes or anything, I wanted to ask you, since we're talking about Ron, there's a chapter called The Burrow, and this is around the time where they bring like the magic car in to like get Harry out of his room, which is probably like one of my favorite scenes in the series, along with like the Mirror of Erised. I love it so much.
He only wants to watch the second movie. My son, who's 7 in November, it's his favorite out of all of the movies. He loves he only loves the second movie because he loves the flying car. He thinks it's like the best thing he's ever seen.
Oh, that's so great. Yeah, I love the flying Ford Anglia.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just think it's such like peak childhood whimsy
Fantasy?
magic. Yeah, like oh, just flying around in this car. It's so cool. And it's such a great moment too, because Harry is just like, he's had bars put over his window. He had a food slot in his door that they're pushing food through like once a day.
Did you ever wonder why like he didn't say to the Weasleys like, I'll give you like money, let me stay with you for the summer?
He talks about that in one of the books. I think it's in Goblet of Fire, where he was like, I would be more than happy to split my entire riches with them if only they would take it. He's like, I know they wouldn't take it, and they like wouldn't feel good about me like offering.
My whole thought was like, how can he trick them into taking the money? So
right? Yeah.
That was my whole thought of like, here's some inheritance you didn't know of for anybody who helped Harry Potter,
Yeah. Did you notice though at the beginning of the book when they're in like Diagon Alley and Lockhart gives him the free books, because the Weasleys were talking about how expensive the books were and they had to get them for everyone. He takes the free books that he got and he put it in their cauldron.
Yeah.
And he's like, here, take these, I'll buy my own. I'm like, aw.
Loved that.
So great.
It was just a really great part, and it was, as someone who like, if I kept trying to put myself in Harry's position, and I was like, how could I trick these people into taking my money? You know what I mean? Like, especially my biggest thing that annoyed me throughout the whole book was how Ron's wand is like jacked up, and I'm like, dude, Harry, go buy your boy a new wand. How much does it possibly cost? Just go buy him a new wand.
I know. That was, but then it perfectly comes back to Lockhart. Right? Yeah, like
it makes sense later, but I'm like, dude, like, come on, share the wealth.
Yeah, share the wealth a bit, for real. I did love the scene where like Ron is about to cast the slug thing at Draco and he ends up vomiting slugs. I thought that was fantastic.
I was gonna say that. I love that. And they're like, you kind of just gotta let it, take its course at this point, And but I really did like more in the books where when Draco, they find out he's on Slytherin's Quidditch team, and Hermione is just like, oh, what's it like to have your dad buy you your position? I was like, yes. But also, Harry, go out and buy the rest of your teammates who have ones. You don't even have to get him the best one that's out there, but get him some Nimbus 2000s.
Right, yeah, for sure. For sure.
But also, it also bothered me with the Quidditch matches, how, like, when Snape finally, at first I think Snape is the one who's messing with Harry's broom, and they find out it isn't. And then, is it in book 2 or is it in book 1 where Snape referees the match, and they're worried that he's gonna like mess with Harry, and it turns out he was really just like trying to protect him and all that. There was just a lot up in the air with the Quidditch matches that I didn't really understand in the first 2 books, where I'm like, how does this work with who's refereeing and scoring, and nobody else can step in and say, oh, look, that bludger is only going after Harry. Like, maybe we should pause the game for a moment.
I know. They even talk about that in the second book, where it's like, they're like, oh, should we pause it? And they're all like, no. And it's like, why?
Yeah, they're like, no, it would be us forfeiting the game. And blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, what does that mean? Like, why would that forfeit the game?
How would that forfeit the game if they would be able to find out that it had been tampered with, which you find out later it was Dobby, which also, how does Dobby have magic? I have not gotten there in the books or don't remember from the movies.
Yeah, the house elves have, they don't really advertise it a whole lot, but they have very, very powerful magic.
But so how did the house elves get, like, when Dobby says, like, oh, my family is the one I'm stuck with, or the family I have to serve for the rest of my life. was there a war where goblins or whatever Dobby is lost and they had to enter in indentured servitude to a family?
Yeah. Yeah, there's something like that. It gets explained in the 5th book, and I can't remember the specific details of it. But there was some sort of like war or something where now they're like these indentured servants.
Okay.
But
I just can't. Set him free, like tricked him to set him free. I loved that. Yeah. Even though Dobby had like fucked with him the whole goddamn book, it was one of those like Dobby thinks he means well, but he's really just like fucking up my life so much.
Yeah, he was meaning well, and Harry even tells him at the end of the book, he's like, you know, you're free as long as you never do that again. And you know, I don't know how I felt about the end of the book there, where like the movie and the book are a little different in how Dobby is freed. Mm-hmm. Where I think the movie did it better, where Harry
in the book,
yeah, right? He's got it like in the book, and he hands it to him, and then he hands the whole diary to Dobby.
Yeah, there's a piece of clothing in it.
Yeah, but in the
book, it's way different.
Yeah, he like puts the sock on top of the diary, and like he like throws the sock to the side. And Dobby like picks up the sock, and I'm like, does that still count? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I was a little confused in that, and that was one of the few instances I liked how the movie did it better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, going back to the Burrow here, so they take the car ride over to the Weasleys, and yeah, what do you think after reading? Because this is the first time that we go to the Weasleys' house, right? I think in the books. Mm-hmm. But you've also seen the movies, so like, do you have any like fondness for the Weasley house?
I do. Like, they just seem like really like good. Excuse me, I have the hiccups so bad right now.
Oh no.
They just seem like really good people, and I really love in the second movie and in the second book when they confront each other in the bookstore, and Dad Weasley says like, we have a very different definition of, you know, what a proper wizard is or whatever it is, you know, and I really love that. I just love them. They seem like good people who have good morals. I just didn't like how like everyone was like, oh, there's so many Weasleys, like, you know, like, oh, another Weasley, blah, 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 blah. But other than that, I loved them.
Yeah, they're fantastic. I just love the household in general. Just this house that's like leaning a bit to one side, and they have like these gnomes in the garden that they have to like de-gnome their garden.
That. And that wasn't really in the movie where they have to get like the gnomes out of the garden. I loved that.
Right? Yeah. It's so great. And like I loved like when Ron and the twins come back with Harry, and the mom is like yelling at them while also like making a plate of food for Harry and being like, "Oh, hello, Harry, dear." Yeah. I thought that was so great.
She's like it. She's like, she's mad at him. She doesn't care.
Yeah.
Well, like, I look at it sometimes in the sense of like, as a mother, and if my kid, and I'm magical, shows up with like their friend, and they're like, oh, they were locked in their bedroom, you know, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
I would not have ever allowed them to go back to that home. Like,
right? I know.
Such a mama there. Like, I would have been like, I don't care if you don't have money, even though Harry did. Like, I want to take you in.
Yeah, for sure.
Their two oldest are grown and out of the house. We have the room for you. We made do as it is, and Harry's not really asking you for anything. Mm-hmm. I just that was like the one thing for me is like, why didn't they step in and say like, we'll take you in? Stop
I will say
back to the Dursley.
Yeah, I will say there is a magical reason for it. There is it, and it'll get explained either in the next book or the fourth book, I think. But there's a reason. There's a magical reason why Harry has to be at the Dursleys.
But that's interesting because when they talk about Tom Riddle and him saying, like, I don't want to go back to my orphanage. And they're like, oh, well, if it wasn't, for the current circumstances, like, you wouldn't have to go back maybe. And that's why he kind of orchestrates the rest of everything happening as it does. So it was like, why does Harry have to go back to the Dursleys?
Right.
Why couldn't he have stayed at Hogwarts?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want to spoil it for you, but there's definitely, like, Dumbledore has asked the Weasleys not to do that. To, like, not let him stay with him. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. There's a reason, not just, like, their own, like, passivity.
Right. Yeah. No, they're very much wanting Harry to stay there, yeah. I love I love this quote from Arthur Weasley. He's such a I think it's so funny that Arthur Weasley is so into, like, all this Muggle stuff, like all the, like, Muggle, like, technology and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And when he gets home, Mrs. Weasley says, "Your sons flew that car all the way to Harry's and back last night. What do you think of that?" And he looks at them and says, "Did you really? Did it go all right?"
So excited about it.
Yeah, he's, like, fully on board. And then something I thought was interesting that I caught this time around, I think that the twins take after Mr. Weasley actually quite a bit. Like, the more I think about it, the more, like, mischievous I think Mr. Weasley is, Arthur Weasley.
Yeah.
And the twins, they lockpick Harry's door, and with just, like, a regular set of lockpicks. And they said there's some Muggle things worth learning. And I'm like, I wonder if they got that from their dad. Like, I wonder if they like have an appreciation of just, like, Muggle things. Because all of the other wizards, like, none of them know, like, what soccer is or, like, any other, like, normal, like, Muggle stuff. Like, they don't know any of that. And so I think it's funny, every now and then the twins will have either, like, a set of lockpicks or just, like, a regular firework or something. There's a scene later in the book where it's just something, like, happening in the background. It's not even, like, something the story is focusing on. And the twins have a firework and they have a salamander. Like a fire-breathing salamander.
Like that part.
And they feed this firework to the salamander, and it just, like, goes flying around the room with, like, sparks coming out of its mouth.
I was like, did it live? Is it okay? That's where my mind went.
Oh my god. I'm like, this is so... Oh my god. It's just so them. It's perfectly them. But I just love that it was just, like, happening in the background. It was just like Harry walked through the common room as the twins were, like, lighting a firework in this salamander. It's like, what? Yeah, and then, in Diagon Alley we see Lucius, he, like, shuffles the diary into Ginny's books when he, like, picks it up.
One big difference I found between the book and the movie is that when Harry says Diagon Alley instead of Diagon Alley and ends up where he does, that in the books, Lucius is there saying, like, I need you to hide all of this shit that I have.
Yeah.
That's illegal. But in the movie, that's not what it is. I can't remember specifically what it is, but that's not what it is. And in the books, it played into it later, where he's like, "Well, go look under the floorboards in this room," and the movie's just kind of glossed over that whole thing.
Yeah, that is a weird plot point to gloss over, because I think it's pretty relevant to like why the diary is even around. Because of this thing that Lucius had that he, like, needed to get rid of because he was worried about, like, people coming by and, like, looking for Muggle artifacts and stuff, and or
his
looking
house
for
does
dark
get
artifacts.
rated in the books. Like, his house does get rated.
Yeah, and so I don't know why that wasn't included, because it's kind of a big part of like why he shuffled it into her books. And he was also hoping, because he hates Arthur, we even see them get in a fight in the bookstore in the book.
Yeah, but we have very different definitions. You know?
And like Arthur like hits him or pushes him into a bookshelf or whatever. And so I was kind of bummed that didn't make the movie. But so the reason he does that is, first of all, to get rid of the diary, but also he hates Arthur Weasley. So he's hoping that if Ginny could get into some sort of scandal, it would look bad on Arthur and maybe he would lose his job or whatever.
The books explained it so much better than the movie did. It made so much more sense through the movie at the end where they call him out and they're like, oh, you hoped it was going to be like this, this, and this. And it didn't turn out that way. And yeah, I enjoyed it much more, that plot point with the books.
Yeah, for sure. And then we get the boys go into platform 9 3/4 only to find that it's closed up thanks to Dobby, and they fly the car to Hogwarts. And there's so many other better ways that they could have gone about this. They could have just waited for their parents to come back through the portal, but
it's not anything but what they decided to do.
But I'm so glad they did, because we get another flying the car scene, and I love it so much.
Later plot points where they're in the forest and the car saves them, and
yeah, for sure. It's a whole thing, and I love that scene as well. I think that scene is amazing in the movie. I really love that scene in the movie. But I love that it's running out of gas. And Ron does the thing where he's like patting the dashboard. He's like, it's okay, just a little bit further. Like, how many times have we all done that if we're in the middle of like a snowstorm, or like if we're about to run out of gas or something? Like, we'll get there. Like, I love that little moment. And then they crash into the Whomping Willow, and the car like boots them out. It like opens the doors and like flips the seats and like pushes them out.
I liked in the books how they point out how Harry's owl is like really pissed at him because of like everything that's happened with the car.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then as they get into the school, Dumbledore asks them, or he pulls Harry aside and he says, "Please explain why you've done this." And what he's looking for in this moment, because everybody else is like, oh, Harry thinks he's so cool flying a car to school, like, gonna make an entrance, Harry. And Dumbledore doesn't know. And he's like, is it because of that? Like, can you give me like any other reason to believe that you're not like so full of yourself that you decided to fly a car to school?
Yeah.
And so I kind of like that that's like a little bit of foreshadowing of Dumbledore like hoping to get a good gauge on where Harry's ego is at in this book. And it kind of starts at this moment where he's like, just please tell me you didn't do this out of a desire to be like cool or whatever. And so I thought that was pretty cool. That's something I only caught on this read. And then Ron gets a howler. How many times have you wanted to send a howler to your kid at school? Like, I think it's the funniest thing to include in the series because it makes so much sense, like lore wise, and just like man, if your parent, if the threat of having a howler sent to you at school where everyone could hear your mom screaming at you, like, that's enough to like keep you in line.
The longer you wait to open it, the worse it's going to be.
Yeah, I would have loved to know like what happens like if you wait to open it. Maybe it gets louder and louder, I don't know.
I would have been a howler mom. Like if my kid I am just someone who's like very conscientious of like what it takes for another adult to be doing what they're doing for my child when it comes to like teaching and all of that. And this last year, my son, we had to get him tested if he had a learning disability. And, it turned out in the end, he doesn't have a learning disability. He probably has ADHD, but
Sure.
It's not like he can't do it. It's just getting, the system set up for him to be able to do it,
Right. Yeah.
But we had some issues of him distracting other students and not letting other people get their stuff done. And like, if he had been away at boarding school and I could have sent a howler, I would have absolutely sent him a howler. I am that type of mom. I do not care. I will shame you in that way into being respectful.
Right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, my mom always threatened me with boarding school, and
I would have loved it.
I know, me too.
I'll take it. Thank you.
I know. And I didn't know how to be like, yeah, send me to boarding school. Do it. Like I wanted to go so bad. And she never did, but I was like, man, that would be so cool if I got sent off to boarding school.
It is very cool in theory, but I think a lot of the long-term, effects and solutions and whatnot, depending on the circumstances and the child, everybody's different. Yeah, I think I would have been okay. I was always a very independent child. I loved to read. I was fine on my own. I didn't need anything. Yeah. My son needs that attention and stimulation and whatnot, and it would just not work for him.
For sure.
And I'm I'm not selfish enough to be yeah, I had a kid. This is just me again. Go off. You know what I mean?
Right.
I took the responsibility of having this child. I think I should also play a really big hand in rearing him.
Right. Yeah, definitely. So as we're getting closer to the end of the episode here, let's talk about. I wanted to ask you. The movies had two different actors. They had Richard Harris and Michael Gambon, and Richard Harris was the one in the first two movies, and then he sadly passed away, and it became Michael Gambon took over the role. And I was watching the scene where Mrs. Norris, the cat, gets petrified by the basilisk, and how Richard Harris just brought this cool and calm demeanor to the situation, which is book accurate, and he's just very level-headed and logical and very calm and kind, and he's calm down everybody, we'll figure it out. We have these mandrakes that are planted, they're going to be ready in a month, and when they are, then we can use it as a serum to get the to unpetrify these people. And I was like, man, he does such a good job. I was just so impressed with him the entire scene. I'm like, that is exactly what I expect from Dumbledore. And then somebody mentioned in the previous episode that we did that Michael Gambon, when he comes in the books, Dumbledore is starting to become more of an action figure. He's getting these bigger, more bombastic scenes. And Michael Gambon displays that a little bit better than Richard Harris probably would be able to. And so I was just curious if you had a preference, if you liked one over the other.
If I'm being brutally honest, if I had not known that the actor passed away and he was obviously replaced, I would have never known the difference.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Absolutely never, ever known the difference.
That's fair. Yeah.
I thought it was so seamless. And I did think the original Dumbledore looked a little older than, the person who replaced him. I thought it was really seamless. I had no issues whatsoever with the movie Dumbledore being, not recast, but recast, you know what I mean? Yeah. I loved it. I thought both of them were very good at it. I had no problem with either one of them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they both. You? I don't think I have a preference. I think that they both encapsulated the two different sides of Dumbledore, because especially in the first couple books, Harry is significantly younger, and he's Dumbledore is still pushing him forward, but he's having to use kid gloves to like support this kid who's been like abused his whole life and trying to like show him some kindness and love. And then you have
For the first time.
Yeah. And then you have like the other side of Dumbledore that we see later in like like Half-Blood Prince, where Dumbledore is like actively like throwing spells around and like hiking up mountains to get to Voldemort's secret like place and all that. And it's like, man, Gambon encapsulates that side, like the adventurous side of Dumbledore, like the more serious side of Dumbledore so well. And so, as sad as it is that that Richard Harris passed away, and that's the reason, I think it worked out perfectly to where it kind of moved from this actor who perfectly encapsulated the first 2 or 3 books of Dumbledore, and then it passed on to someone who is like more adept at doing like the serious side of Dumbledore. I thought that was really, really well done.
Yeah, I like the first Dumbledore, but if I had to pick between the two, I would probably pick the second actor.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's totally fair. And then, we talked about the rogue bludger, and the only thing I really have to say about this is it was such a cool scene in the movie. Oh, where they're like flying through all of the like bracing in the arena.
I kept going like this.
Yeah, and it's just like the bludger is just like crashing through like beams and posts and all this stuff, and Draco is like right on his heels, and they're both like avoiding this bludger, and then like Harry like falls to the ground and he like rolls out of the way of the bludger, like hitting the ground, and then he does it again, and then it goes like between his legs, and it was just so cool. And then somebody like blows it up, and it's like, why did you guys not do that like a long time ago
initially? Or why did you say like something's wrong here? Like,
Oh, I thought it was funny that Harry, in the book, Harry came into the Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, and Ron and Hermione are like making the potion, like the Polyjuice potion, and they started a fire in the bowl of the toilet and had the cauldron on the seat, and so it was like cooking the cauldron from the toilet. I'm like, that's so inventive, but that's also some like major crackhead behavior, and I'm here for it.
I related to it in the sense that I was like, I would have thought this up. I would have been like, dude, nobody comes in the bathroom. Like, let's just make a pot chamber, whatever, in the toilet. Like, we're good.
Right. Yeah.
I loved it. I thought it was really great. And I loved the like callbacks where you realize like, oh, Moaning Myrtle died like 50 years ago. Like, let's go ask her. And if she died here, it must have been, where the chamber opens. I really like that connection.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And then we get the dueling club. This is where Harry learns Expelliarmus, his signature spell.
What's his name? Malfoy went early, and he's never called out on it, and that really pissed me off.
I know, yeah. And then they like Harry does like a tickling spell, and then Draco does one where like Harry's like feet can't stop moving, and then Draco summons like a snake. It's just like, what the heck? And Harry's like,
I was stopping the snake, but everybody thought I was like egging it on.
Right, yeah. That whole thing was like, oh man, so much is happening. The thing that I thought was kind of weird, and I thought it would have been a perfect thing for the movie to do, but in the book it specifically says that like Harry gets hit with this tickling spell, and that Draco gets hit with a tickling spell, and Harry gets like the feet moving. I'm like, why didn't they do that in the movie? They just had them like blow up, basically, just like be like force pushed across the room. I'm like, why did you not have it be like this weird goofy spell? That would have been so interesting visually for the movie.
It was much more clear in the books than it was in the movie.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that in the book, once the dust settles, Hermione is just in a headlock by a Slytherin girl.
Yeah.
It's just like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Because you think about it, it's like they would have had to throw down their wands and like gone like fisticuffs. It's like, man, you guys didn't even use magic.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so great. Oh, at the around Christmas time, the text says Dumbledore led them in a few of his favorite carols. And I just think that's so funny to think about Dumbledore just like singing Christmas carols with the school.
Yeah, that would have been great to see.
Just like, I forget what book it is. It might even be the first book, but it talks about around Christmas time, like Dumbledore just wearing like his earmuffs that he got for Christmas. And I'm like, he is such a jolly fellow. Like, he is just such a he is just such a Christmas guy. I think it's so funny. Just
can't relate, but okay.
Yeah. And then when they take the polyjuice, that scene is horrific. I accidentally have the first book here instead of grabbing the second book, but it's at the end of chapter 12, and it describes them like their skin boiling and deforming, and it like happens.
The Minalima thing has like the whole like you could turn the things in the book, and you can see their different phases of the transformation, which I loved.
Yeah, that was super cool. I've played with that wheel a bunch, looking at the different things.
Yeah, every face, like which order can I do it in? Like that was really fun.
That's cool. Yeah. But I was like, dude, this is horrific because it describes it in like some pretty detailed stuff, talking about like their skin like melting off and like all this stuff. I'm like, dude. That is a horror show. Like, that is.
And I thought it was funny in the movie where Hermione's pouring it into the glasses for them, and like the first two glasses have already been poured and they look like liquid, but she's pouring the last one and it's like very chunky. And I was like, oh my God. I don't. First of all, I have this thing with hair. My friends make fun of me because they're like, Sam, you have the thickest hair of anyone we know. You have more hair than anyone we've ever known. And they go, you have a fear of hair. And I'm like, yes, I do. I had a girlfriend in college. We were, can we say anything on this podcast?
Yeah, I can edit it out.
About smoking things?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've already sworn all the way through.
We were in a bathroom when we were smoking something, and a girl picked up a hairball in the corner of the bathroom that we were smoking because she thought it was funny, and she went to rub it on me.
Oh, no.
And I literally started vomiting into the toilet that we were in.
No.
Because I cannot do hair. I cannot do hair. So watching the movie where they put the hair in these drinks.
Oh, my God.
We drink them.
Oh. Yeah.
It is so triggering for me. Of all the things they could have chosen, and they do it right at the end, right before they drink it. It's not like they put it in the cauldron.
And it like gets cooked in. Yeah. Oh my gosh. That's awful.
They just drink the hair.
Oh, God. It's so gross. It's
so gross, Spencer. It's so gross. That was the hardest part for me, not the transformation.
Yeah.
Not Hermione being a cat. It was like you guys just like straight up drink hair.
Oh, nasty. Nasty.
So nasty.
That was funny that Hermione got turned into a cat though. And she had to go up to... It was
much clearer in the book than it was in the movie that, like, she did not mean... I swear, I always thought she purposely wanted to be the cat because she thought it would be easier to get around. And then reading the book, I was like, oh, I'm an idiot. I read that wrong. It was an accident.
Yeah.
It was an accident.
Oh, man, that's such a funny way to interpret that. That's so great.
I thought she did it on purpose. I thought she was trying to be sneaky and be like, oh, I could be a cat. I can get around so many more places.
Oh,
no, it was an accident.
That's so great. That's so funny. I'm surprised that more kids don't do the polyjuice potion thing for, like, Halloween or, like, in the Harry Potter world. Like, I'm surprised more kids aren't like, oh, I'll be a cat for Halloween and, like, make a polyjuice potion.
I thought of it more as like, oh, somebody really has a crush on someone that they know only likes someone else, so let me like turn myself into them. Like me, or I could feel their affection for me for a minute.
Right.
That's what I looked at it as. It felt very could be
devious.
Used in the wrong ways. It could be used in the wrong way.
Yeah, it is kind of a sketchy potion, isn't it?
Yeah.
I thought it was funny where at the end of the whole like polyjuice thing, they're like, we'll take you to Madame Pomfrey. She never asks too many questions.
I love that.
And I love, like, this nurse is such a thing throughout the entire series, especially in the books. You see her a lot more. And she, like, they go into Madame Pomfrey with some of the most insane, like, injuries and just magic gone wrong. And you got to imagine that this nurse is just like, it's a magic school. Stuff is gonna happen. You know what I mean? Like, I can't, like, I can't interrogate. Yeah, like, I can't interrogate every single kid about, like, the crazy stuff that goes on here. Like, magic is flying around, you know?
I look at it as more, she doesn't care why or how it happened to you. Because if she starts to question or care or make a stink, people are not going to come to her when they need the help. So I looked at it as where she's like, I don't care what it is. Do you need the help? Come to me. And if I ever make it a point to be like, why are you here? What was this from? It's going to keep people from coming to me. So she was just looking at it as, I'm not a police officer. I'm not here to find out the who, what, where, when, why. Do you need help? Yes. And I'm going to keep myself so neutral that anytime anyone needs help, they feel comfortable with coming to me.
That's such a good point. I didn't even think about that because, yeah, especially for, like, young teenagers, if they think they're going to get in trouble, they're like, oh, I'll hide my hand turning into a lizard hand. I'll just keep it in a glove. Like,
and it'll end up worse than it initially was. And so that's how I looked at it, is where she was like, no, like, I am just here to heal. I don't care what got you to this point. Just come to me no matter what.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I love that. But so I missed something when the polyjuice has taken effect and they're talking to Malfoy in the movie. I loved this moment. Tom Felton's face in this moment is so funny. When he's like, why do you have glasses on? And one of them says, the one that's Harry is like, I need them to read. And he goes, I didn't know you could read.
I didn't know you could read. I loved that.
He kind of makes this face like, just kind of like nods. And he does it so well. And I found out just a couple days ago that it's actually because Tom Felton, the kid that plays Draco, he forgot his line. And so he asked, like, why do you have glasses on? He said, because, like, I need him to read or whatever. And he, like, in a second, like, that's how good of an actor he is. In a second, he was just, like, able to think of this super witty, funny line. And it's one of, like, the most iconic. If you look up, I didn't know you could read on YouTube, it's, like, all that comes up. Like, there's so many clips of it. And it just became, like, this iconic thing. And it's like, oh, yeah, of course the director kept that in, man. Like, that is gold. And he moves so seamlessly from that to what he's saying next to the person behind him. And I was just like, man, what a great, like, some of these actors, these little kid actors are just so good. It blows my mind.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, and then we kind of talked about when Dumbledore is in the hut, and he's like, you will find that I will only have left this school when none remain who are loyal to me. And this is the moment where Hagrid gets taken away to Azkaban, and Dumbledore gets suspended, and we find out that this is all, like, workings of Lucius Malfoy. Did you have any, like, thoughts or feelings on this in the moment?
I mean, at the moment I was, like, upset because I was like, you never had any concrete evidence in the beginning to say that it was him. And, you know, there was some old Scrooge who was, you know, the leader of the school, whatever you call it. What is Dumbledore to the school? What do they call
the headmaster?
Headmaster. This old headmaster who was just like, it was easier to, like, you know, suspend Dumbledore or Hagrid and whatnot. Which really annoyed me. That actually really annoyed me. So I don't know. I go back and forth on that whole thing because it didn't really make that much sense to me that they, like, expelled him, but then kept him as the groundskeeper, and then now it's coming back, so we want to put you away even though you've done nothing since then.
Right.
It was hard for me to wrap my head around.
Yeah, it's like, why would you think that Hagrid got caught for this once and then was like, I'm gonna do it again? Like, what?
But you also thought you caught him for it the first time, and like you didn't put him away.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was a little iffy for me.
Yeah, it's definitely a little iffy. Did you also notice that so Hagrid gets caught and they break his wand, and did you notice that his like umbrella is like his wand that Dumbledore put back together?
Immediately.
But he had to like hide it.
Immediately. That was very obvious to me. Like, oh, he still has his wand. And it didn't make sense to me, like, just because they don't graduate from the school, like, they can't, like, use magic or have a wand. Like,
I know,
you
right?
have to go to school to be allowed to use a wand. Or, like, that made no sense to me.
Right. But yeah, so then we get he tells them to follow the spiders, and we get the scene where they go out into the woods and they meet up with the car, and he's like, what does he say? He's like, oh, the car is gone. Oh, the forest has made it go wild. And they look at this car that's just been trundling around the forest, and it's like, I want a short story so bad of just the car leaving them near the beginning of the book and just going on this adventure through the Forbidden Forest. I think that would be so funny.
Yeah.
But the movie, dude, do you hate spiders?
If you had to ask, like, it's funny because my mom got married yesterday, right?
Oh, yeah.
So I was at her wedding yesterday, and the day before we did I wouldn't call it a rehearsal dinner because it was just like our family at the home, you know? And we were just hanging out. But I was like, let me do like a little like fun game, you know, because we didn't do a bridal shower for my mom. You know, her and her husband are in their 60s, you know?
Right. Yeah.
So I was like, let's just do like a little fun game. And one of the questions I put on the sheet was, if there's a spider in your house, who is the one that's going to take care of it? Right. And if you asked me in my household, if there was a spider and it was me and my husband, I would be the one to take care of it. But I would be the one who lightly grabs it and puts it outside. Like I would not. Oh,
no, never.
Where my husband is the one, if he had to be in charge of it, he's going to smash that and done with it.
Right.
So I like to think of myself as the one who's going to take care of the spiders in a sensible, not murderous way, you know. Everybody's different or whatnot.
Sensible.
I would have tried to take care of the situation in a non-violent way, but with the way that it ended for them, I mean, no holds barred. I'm gonna go after you.
Right. Well, these spiders are huge, and like the book talks about them, but like in the movie, they move so fast. I could not believe how fast these spiders were moving. They get in the car to like run away, and the spiders are like right behind them. Like there's just this army of spiders that are just, and it just looks so creepy how fast their legs were moving.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't like that. And J.K. Rowling even said in that interview with the movie writer that that was the scene she was most worried about because she didn't know, because up at that point, that was in 2002, and at that point spiders did not look good in movies. Like they looked really cheesy, really dumb. But she was like, I was really impressed with how they looked in this movie. And I would definitely echo that. I think they looked really, really good, and they looked super creepy and scary. Like it was exactly what they were supposed to be.
Yeah.
So we talked about the most important quote in the book, where Harry says, "It only put me in Gryffindor because I asked not to go into Slytherin." And Dumbledore says, "Exactly, which makes you very different from Tom Riddle. It is our choices, Harry, that show who we are far more than our actions." And I think that this is such an important lesson, because Dresden Files actually has a very similar theme of this exact sentiment, because there's a point where, no major spoilers or anything, but Harry gets an apprentice, and she's had kind of a troubled past. And are you taking a screenshot of it?
I was taking a picture for my Instagram, okay?
Nice. Um, and so his apprentice had a bit of a troubled past, and so they kind of go through a similar life lesson as this. And I'm like, I think it's so important, especially for kids, to know that it's not like your like what you can or can't do that defines you. It's like the choices you make in life and the moral ground that you're willing to take.
You're a nurture guy. I struggle a lot. Like, I love to watch a lot of cult documentaries in general in my life, and
Yeah.
a really big theme in all of them is nature versus nurture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's always been a huge argument through society in general. And while I believe nurture is a majority point for me, like how you're nurtured and how you handle that. But I do believe there's a little bit of nature, like 10% nature, 90% nurture,
Oh, definitely. Yeah, yeah.
And I think this book is a really good representation of that.
Yeah, for sure. Like Harry, coming from the background that he does, he has a certain way about him. The way he was raised was so awful that it's definitely made him like quick-witted and like clever, and he had to think on his feet all the time. And he's
He
very
would have been
like,
perfect for Slytherin if he had
yeah,
decided to go dark.
right. But I think it had the opposite effect where Harry, instead of becoming a worse person, he looked at them as like, I never want to treat anyone like that ever. And so he kind of like went the opposite way. And so that would be like the nature part of it. But then like the nurture part with Dumbledore Dumbledore is like, no, you have choices. Like you can choose to be a better person rather than the hand that you've been dealt. Um, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of that theme in like addiction with like children
Yeah,
of parents with addiction, where it's like, okay, do I continue this cycle or do I completely break it? Because it's basically one of the two options I have. Do I want to continue this, toxic cycle, or do I want to break it and completely break away from it? And I thought that
right,
was very relevant during the reading of these books.
right, yeah, for sure, without a
Hmm.
doubt, yeah. Um, so then we go into the scene that we already talked about a little bit, where Dobby is freed. Malfoy, Lucius Malfoy is in the office with Dumbledore, and he basically like spells it all out for him, and he's like, I know like what you're about. Like, I know that like this was your plan, and you were trying to frame Arthur and all this stuff, and just kind of lays it out for him. And I thought that was such a great scene, both in the movie and the book. I think both of them like did it excellently. Like Bryce said at the beginning, the first two movies are so similar to the book. They just bring the book to life rather than trying to do their own thing.
So
And
on point. The things that they
mhm,
change don't change like the
right,
actual plot line in any way, and I
yeah,
I appreciated that.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think they really did a good job of just like bringing the book to life. And I would say the other movies do as well. I don't think they never get like super far away from the books, but in the fourth book is probably the most different from its source material. And you'll see that as you kind of go through that book. There's just like a lot of little things that are changed. The third book is still like really really close to the source material. Like there's really only the only thing the third movie does is it doesn't fully explain the Marauders well enough, like the guys that made the Marauders map, and like Harry's dad and Sirius and all of them, like Peter Pettigrew and Lupin and all of them. It doesn't explain like what they're about. I was actually watching it with my mom this last Christmas, and she was like, so I don't get, like, she was asking some questions about the Marauders, and I was like, yeah, it doesn't really explain that they were all like friends in school and that they made this
Mhm.
map together for like a specific purpose. And like so like
Mhm.
That's something you'll definitely learn more of in the third book. But I think for the most part, the movies really do a good job of bringing the books to life, especially Deathly Hallows. Oh
Yeah.
man, Deathly Hallows is so good, so good. And there's even more in the book. Like if you love the Deathly Hallow movies, the Deathly Hallow book, oh, there's just like extra stuff that gets added that's just like, oh, it's so
No, see,
nice.
that's why I love reading the books, because I've always said once I get past Goblet of Fire in the movies, I have no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
None whatsoever.
Oh
Period. And
man.
I've always said, I want to read the books because I feel like the movies will I will love them if I understand what's going on. And I feel like you're missing so later books. I've always said, I feel like I would love this so much more if I had the movies. I would love them more if I had read the books, because there's just too much to miss. There's just too much.
Yeah, that's what I did. I read all the books, and then after I finished them, I was like, I need more Harry Potter, and so I watched all the movies back to back, and I had such a bigger appreciation for them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that brings us kind of to the end. There is a great line where in the movie, Lucius is there in the office of Dumbledore, and he's like, Dumbledore says something about Harry, or like, we'll always like fight evil or whatever. And Lucius says, well then, let us hope that Mr. Potter will always be around to save the day. And Harry just looks him dead in the eyes and he says, don't worry, I will be. And yeah, let's go. Like, it's just such a great move. And then of course, like, Dobby and the journal and the sock, like all of that was so great in the movie. I didn't quite like how the book did it, because I just think the way the movie did it made more sense. But yeah, I love that. Of course, like Dobby being a free elf, and we'll definitely see some more of him pretty soon here. But then as we're getting ready to go, like at the end of the book, like the very like last like epilogue scene of the book, everybody's kind of saying goodbye to each other, and Harry, all his letters got stopped at the beginning of the book. And so he takes a piece of paper and he writes a phone number on it twice, and he rips it down the middle, and he gives it to Ron and Hermione. And then he looks to Ron and he says, this is called a telephone number. I taught your dad how to use a telephone last summer. He'll know.
After the like rubber duck thing, I was like, all right, I guess they would need to have like telephones explained to them. It was very confusing for me with that, where it was like, I thought they like lived in conjunction with like the Muggle world, so like the fact that they wouldn't know how to use a phone was very confusing to me.
They're like way out in the middle of nowhere, not near anybody. Like they're like way out in the countryside, and I think even the people that do live around them are also wizards, because there's like these little, kind of like Godric's Hollow. There's like these little wizard communities where they all kind of like live and do stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
And then last note here, there is in the movie, I think so far out of the first two movies, or just taking the first two into consideration, they have done the endings better than the book. Like that last little epilogue part, not like the whole ending, but like the last little like saying goodbye kind of thing. I think they do that better in the book, because in the book, like Harry says the thing about the telephone, he's like, I'll see you next year or whatever, and that's the end of it. And in the movie, they're like all at the assembly, and Dumbledore is saying like, we fought this evil this year, and we did such a great job with that and all this stuff. And then Hagrid comes in the door, and it gets real quiet, and Hagrid like walks down all the way. He comes to Harry, and he's like, thank you so much. He's like, I would have been stuck in Azkaban if you hadn't like figured this out and done that. He's like, I owe so much to you. And like Harry stands up out of his seat, and he says, there's no Hogwarts without you, Hagrid. and then he like gives him a hug, and everybody like starts clapping. Like first Dumbledore gets up, he starts clapping, and but like other people haven't joined in yet, and then like Harry like starts clapping, and everybody starts losing it. And I'm just like crying, and I watched this morning, and I'm like, I did not expect to be tearing up at 9 o'clock in the morning. It's so it was just so good. I loved that send off, and then same in the first book. I loved Harry like saying goodbye to everyone like in front of the train, and he's like, I don't know. They do the endings just like a little bit better in the movies, and it was fantastic. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I feel the same.
So, final thoughts here as we're about to do our outro. Do you like one more than the other, like the first book or the second book?
I mean, no, I think more for me is that, I had already watched the movies prior multiple times to reading the book, and I'd always been worried, like, I always have the issue of I need to read something before I watch it. I can't watch it first because for whatever reason, my brain doesn't want to read it.
Yeah.
And this was the exception to the rule. I thoroughly enjoyed it. It is something I've enjoyed over years. Like, I remember going to like the midnight screenings of Goblet of Fire. Like, it has been something I followed as a movie, and I'd always wanted to read it and could never get into it. And literally, Spencer, like, if you would come to me and been like, read this on its own, I would have been like, off, like, I will do it. But you gave me a version of the book that made me not only get super into it, that I'm like, all right, like, I need to know everything I can. I need to watch all the movies. I need, again, like, now that I've read them. It has opened, like, a whole new door for me of Harry Potter lore and appreciating it. And I don't know that I would have enjoyed it as much like 10, 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, I
for
think
sure.
It was kind of a meant to be this
same.
order of, watching the movie and then reading and meeting you and being able to talk about it. So, no, I'm a very big believer in everything that is meant to be happens. And I think it was meant to be with this series and the movies.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, what a great sentiment. I love that so much.
Yeah.
Did you play the game, the Hogwarts Legacy?
Okay. Do you want me to really how much time do we have left? Because I love Hogwarts Legacy. I am now on my third iteration of it. I started with Ravenclaw, then I did Slytherin. Now I am on Hufflepuff, I believe. I'm on Hufflepuff. I love it. My only problem is that there's not enough in the sense of like opening the chest with the like clothing and whatnot. Like, there's only so much clothing you can give me. Give me something else.
Right.
I recently started my third replay of the game. I never fully finish it. I never do like 100%. I usually get to like 90%. You know what I mean? Like,
you finished the story though, right?
Oh, I finish the story every time, but it's more about like getting every mark on the map I don't do. No, I finished the story. I absolutely finished the story, but I'm on my third gameplay recently. I just had restarted like 2 weeks ago, my third time.
Did you see the update they did where they added like,
I was like, I don't give a fuck about taking pictures. Like,
it adds like a whole quest and everything.
I already had that with the system I was playing on.
Okay. See, I'm on PC, so I didn't have that quest.
I'm on PlayStation 5. We had everything. So everyone's like, oh, I'm really excited for the Peeves. What's his name? Peeves. What's the
Peeves is the poltergeist,
Yeah. That's like the game that's added, like the mission that's added for everyone else. I had that from the beginning.
Where you get like a shop or whatever?
It's my least favorite.
What? People say it's their favorite. That's crazy.
I could see how people say it's their favorite if it's something they were not given initially. And it's like, oh, here's the thing everyone else is getting. And you can get, eventually, we're going to give it to you. It's my least favorite part of the game. Spence.
Okay.
It is a
Don't spoil it for me.
hour-long at minimum mission. No, that's what
okay.
I'm saying. It
Okay.
is a tedious. First time was fine, but
Yeah.
every time I've had to play it since then, I'm like, dude, somebody shoot me. Like, this
Oh
is
man.
my nightmare. I hate this. I don't want to do it.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I'm
Because
interested to
he's
see
an
how I feel
annoying
about it.
poltergeist.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So, I mean,
Well,
I've had it from the beginning. It was new for everyone else in the update. And
so
then
what
they have, like,
about so what about like having watched the movies for so long and then being able to walk around Hogwarts? Was that like a dream for you to like walk around Hogwarts?
it was great for me. I loved
Yeah.
it, but like it wasn't something I dreamed about because I don't dream about many things.
For me, it was like, I didn't have like a huge appreciation. So Hogwarts Legacy is the thing that made me read the books.
Really?
Yeah. It was coming out and I was like, I saw it all over the place and I'm like, this just looks like a fun game.
It's
And
so
so
fun.
I picked it up and literally within, I don't know, the first like 6 or so hours of playing it, I was like, I think I need to read these books because there's so much more lore and world building and stuff that I had no idea. I didn't know the series was this deep. And so that's why I picked up the books.
Like with the Minotaurs,
Yeah.
the half horse, half man. I didn't
The
realize
centaurs,
until I
yeah.
read the books that like that was a real plot point in the books.
Right. Yeah.
But I played only the video game.
Right. Yeah, so it was just like it was this turning point for me where I was like, wow, this is like a real thing that I would actually be super interested in. And so
Yeah.
the game kind of jump started that for me. And then I was playing it. I was literally playing the game while listening to the books like at the same time.
Yeah.
And then when I finished the books, I still had more game to play. And so I watched the movies on one screen and I had the game in front of me and I'm like walking around Hogwarts where they are in the movie. It was such a cool experience. It's like the only way, like I'm so glad that I experienced Harry Potter this way because it was just like literally a magical experience for me.
It's one of the few games I've gone back to multiple times because restarting it, the goals of what you have to do to unlock the locks and like all
Right.
of that, it's really fun and it's immersive, but I've had to put it on pause because you've given me so many obligations recently.
So last question before the outro, what book, like having seen the movies, what book are you most excited to get to or to like see that? It's almost like the opposite because like people ask like what book would you most like to see come to the screen, but like what movie would you most like to get like
Goblet
the
of
deeper
Fire.
details? Goblet of Fire.
Goblet of Fire.
That is easily like most people's like number one favorite book, like from what I've heard.
It's the most interesting of the fight for the number one spot, and they bring in the other schools and they throw this like random like Harry and Hermione like do they love each other love story, and even though they don't, and Goblet of Fire.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's super fair because, yeah, Goblet of Fire. It has like out of all of them, it has significantly more details than what's in the movie. Like it has like significantly more.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm really excited for you to check
so
that out.
Like I have the third book, Prisoner of Azkaban, but there's no fourth book printed.
I know. Hopefully soon. I'm excited to get to Prisoner of Azkaban. That's in my top 3 of favorite ones.
But I need to read this 700-page book that you assigned me for next Sunday. So I don't have time right now, and I have it. I want to read it, Spence. Only for you am I like, I'm gonna stop reading the series that I'm really into and go back to one I was interested in, but I would rather be reading something else.
Right. Well,
we
will be there soon. Thank you so much.
We will be here Sunday. 1 week from now, we will be arguing again.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully Gabe will be here this time. I'm not bitter.
100%.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, thank you so much for reading this book with us and for coming and hanging out when everybody else fell off. You were here. And
it's always so weird when you say this though, because I feel like I'm on like past number 10 now at this point. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, clearly I want to be here.
Yeah, for sure. I know.
Like, clearly I get as much, if not more, enjoyment.
By the way, did you say what your house common room is? What room are you going back to tonight? Okay,
Ravenclaw.
cool.
We talked about I think we talked about it before we started recording.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm definitely more of a Slytherin. I took the test and everything, and I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
So you want to be evil.
No, here's the thing: is Slytherin isn't like inherently evil. They're just like they're very like ambitious and very focused and very like they're not like super cuddly or like empathetic might be the wrong word, but
okay, no, I get that.
But they're more like focused and
black and white.
Yeah.
Ravenclaw all the way. I want to be right above the library and the kitchens.
Perfect. All right, everyone. Well, it is time once again to go back to our house common rooms, me to Slytherin and her to Ravenclaw. And we're going to prepare for the next episode of Potter Watch, where we'll be discussing Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. Let us know down in the comments what your favorite Harry Potter moments are and what Harry Potter books or movies you're most looking forward to watching us discuss. Again, you can reach out to us on Twitter, Discord, and Patreon, which are all linked below in the description. We always love chatting with you guys. Please reach out to us. We would love that.
We love it.
Yeah. And also let us know if you would like to be on the show to discuss one of the books or movies. We love having people on to discuss this stuff if you're comfortable on camera and whatnot. So definitely let us know. But that's going to be it for today. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. And until next time, I'll be in my room making no noise and pretending I don't exist. And a big shout out to Caitlin. Thank you so much for backing us at the Green Bone tier.